So, welcome everyone. Welcome to today's podcast. I am super excited to be speaking to a retired physician. Now, today I'm going to be talking to Robert Yoho. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his surname
No, that's
correctly.
fine.
He calls himself, well, he's a 67-year-old physician, first of all, as I said, retired physician, also a whistleblower, medical whistleblower. He practiced medicine in the United States and retired 2 years ago. Now, Robert actually wrote two books, one of them being called Butchered by Healthcare, and the other one, Hormone Secrets. So I really love hearing about what, we talk about Western medicine and everything that's involved, but I love to hear both sides of the story, and especially coming from someone on that side. Having said all of this, welcome, Robert. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Grace. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm sorry I was a moment late getting figured out. The Australian versus the Los Angeles time was a little beyond me. So thanks again for being patient with me. And I didn't even have a shirt on a minute ago. I had to run off and put a shirt on. So my journey is kind of a interesting one, and I gradually red pilled myself about a lot of things. And I was a cosmetic surgeon, sort of happily practicing, and inserting breast implants. I had a more general background, though. I was an emergency physician once, and so I had all these women in their 50s who had terrific menopause symptoms. And rather than treating them with surgery, which was inappropriate in my view, and it's what a lot of plastic surgeons just go ahead and do, I would just pretty much for free, I would help them with a trial of hormone therapy, and if they were interested. And so it was easy to do. If they were in surgery, I could put a testosterone pellet in them, and they would heal quicker, and they would get relief of their menopausal symptoms. And of course, you have to have someone with the appropriate history and in the appropriate age group and the appropriate consent. So I would get that. And I eventually got interested enough in this that I wrote my book, Hormone Secrets, which is all about modern hormone therapy. And as I got more experience and learned more, I realized that there was something wrong, that these medications that we had experience with, in the case of thyroid for 120 years, in the case of the other hormones, progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone, and growth hormone, for 60 to 80 years, we have this massive experience. They clearly work. They clearly are some of the safest and best medications in all of medical care. But the US FDA put black box warnings on them all, as if they were some sort of horrible thing, claiming that there were cancer and blood clotting and heart disease issues up with these things. And so I got further into it and realized that the warnings were fraudulent, and became convinced that the FDA, which I later found out receives 50% of its funding directly from pharmaceutical companies, was the problem. And the pharmaceutical companies were the problem, because these drugs largely would eliminate the need for many prescription drugs, including statins for cholesterol and blood pressure medications and so on. So that became my entry into the corruption field. And then I took it step by step and gradually red pilled myself about the whole thing. And I spent 3 years on this and a year on Hormone Secrets. And I wrote this book. It's got a very inflammatory title. You can see that physician there with gold bars at his at his waist. Butchered by Healthcare, which is the way I feel about the modern medical system, because so many of our decisions are decided purely on economics, and we've really kind of lost touch with the patient first ethic, which is the most important ethic in medicine. It's not do no harm. It's patient first. It's the golden rule. Do what you would expect others to do for you or your family. And so instead, we have all these pressures and all these standards that come from industry and physicians who've been essentially purchased by industry to make up medical standards and so on and so forth to sell more drugs. And a lot of it doesn't really do a lot for the conditions that they're, we've got these diabetic drugs and these or very overweight people that could benefit from dietary control and so on and so forth. So I think that and finally I got most interested recently in the last 6 months in the frauds surrounding COVID and the vaccine and the what we call the global predators who foisted this thing on us. So there's a lot of ground to cover, but I'm going to try to chat with your listeners here, and they can pick up my books on Amazon. These 2 books, I don't make a dime on these. They sell 30 copies a day, but I don't make a dime. And they can pick up the ebooks of either one for $3 on Amazon, $2.99. And that's the lowest price point, really, that it made any sense at all. And then so I think the best thing to do, if it's okay with you, would be to launch into some relevance of the hormone secrets to your campers who are breast cancer survivors or people coping with breast cancer.
Correct. That would be awesome. Yeah, absolutely.
So I have to do a disclaimer here, and this is just necessary because I'm retired, I'm not practicing, and I can't be seen as giving specific medical advice. This is for general informational purposes. Use this at your own risk, and find yourself a licensed physician or other provider to provide your care if you get sick or you need help. So sorry about that disclaimer, but there is a remarkable story about breast cancer that you guys just are not going to believe. Let me tell you a story I'm going to tell you 2 stories that you won't believe. Okay. The first story is that we would be able to prevent 85% of Alzheimer's if all women took estradiol or estrogen, bioidentical estrogen, at the time of their menopause and thereafter. Now, that's a huge claim, but in order to back that up, I put 75 references in Appendix C in this book because nobody's going to believe that. And Alzheimer's is a freaking industry. It's one of the most expensive diagnoses we have, perhaps the most expensive diagnosis if you count long-term care costs. And it can be prevented with bioidentical hormones, ideally bioidentical hormones. And so the other story, that's just going to introduce the story for the breast cancer patients. The other story is that we have a treatment for breast cancer that is no longer used that really works well. And there's a literature about this. If you do searches for it, you can find out about it. And that is testosterone. And it's considered a male hormone, but it's not entirely a male hormone. It beautifully suppresses ovarian and uterine cancer and breast cancer. And it can work even if you have breast cancer. And I know somebody personally who went off to see a doctor that uses testosterone implants, right? And she got the testosterone implant. She was about 100 pounds and she was using a walker. And she went up to 120, and she is emailing me from the beach in Mexico now. So this stuff works. It suppresses breast cancer. There's no guarantees in medicine or life. So, but you can read about it. And there are physician referrals in my book. And there's a website that's referenced in Hormone Secrets of this woman who is a physician in Ohio. And I'll recall her website in just a moment, who treats breast cancer with testosterone and is quite successful at it. And progesterone is helpful also. It also suppresses breast cancer. And in fact, it's the standard of care, in my opinion, to start these bioidentical hormones 4 years after the diagnosis of, after you've suppressed your breast cancer. And we have studies that show that people live longer if they're on hormones. Now, just as a side note, everybody and his grandmother knows that estrogen causes breast cancer. Now, I've got to explain about that. We have this study called the Women's Health Initiative that was completed in the early 2000s and published that studied drugs that were already out of date They were already obsolete at the time that those study was run. And this study cost nearly $1 billion. It was an international or a multi-center study. And at the time that the people, and this is all described in Hormone Secrets in great detail, at the time that the study authors finished the study, they claimed that it proved various things, and this has all been debunked, and I've got the references in here. So the culprit, the breast cancer culprit, was a synthetic drug that was a progesterone replacement called Provera. There are other brand names too. It's methylprogesterone, and that caused a very tiny increase in the breast cancer rate. It's almost imperceptible. But estradiol or estrogen, there was no relationship with breast cancer, and it has many positive effects. So I want your listeners to research this stuff and learn about it. And I've got the references that debunk that World Women's Health Initiative study. Those authors were trying to make a political point and essentially trying to get rid of bioidentical hormones. And frankly, they seem to me as if they were paid off by Big Pharma to do this because they came to conclusions that were unjustified. It just seemed like an evil consequence, and it's all been dissected since. So the bioidentical hormones, the hormones that are the same as the human body, are almost an unalloyed positive, right? They have many good effects on health. They probably make you live longer, but this is all covered up and suppressed, and you can read about it again in that book. Just to give you more background about these pharmaceutical companies, Big Pharma is the most criminal industry in history. They've had $80 billion in judgments and settlements to civil plaintiffs and U.S. federal prosecutors. I mean, it's incredible that they're still around. The payoffs since 2004 for the biggest 22 drug makers have their own Wikipedia page of shame. I'm amazed they can't get it censored off of there. Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and GlaxoSmithKline have all paid settlements, individual settlements, over $2 billion each. Pfizer's anti-inflammatory Bextra killed 50,000 people, and they knew it would happen before they threw it on the market. I quote this couple of people, the commentary about Big Pharma. Peter Rost, who's a former Pfizer marketing vice president, said, "It's scary how many similarities there are between this industry and the mob. Obscene amounts of money, killings and deaths, bribing politicians and others. The difference is all these people in the drug industry look upon themselves as law-abiding citizens. However, when they get together as a group, it's almost like when you have war atrocities. People do things they don't think they're capable of because the group can validate what you're doing is okay." And another CEO, a CEO of Park Davis pharmaceutical CEO, Harry Loyne, said, "If we put horse manure in a capsule, we could sell it to 95% of these doctors." So that's their attitude. And I don't know how anyone can trust them to get an experimental substance put in their body. I mean, it's like having a mobster inject with whatever you want. They ruin their studies with the FDA in order to get the patent. The FDA permits it because they're basically bought by the pharmaceutical companies, and they destroy the statistics. They hide studies, and they corrupt their research contractors in other countries, and it's a totally sick scene. Our medical journals have turned into complete prostitutes. Their editors are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars openly each year by the medical industry, and corporate ghostwriters write 95% of their articles. And the, quote, authors are paid huge fees just to use their names. If this was law, business, or government, bribes like these could theoretically result in firing or criminal prosecution. But this is accepted practice in healthcare. They're simply disclosed as, quote, conflicts of interest. So, I mean, it's a mess, and I can go further in any direction you want.
Well, look, the thing is just already that's just blown my mind because, having touched on, the pharmaceutical side of things, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I did my research. Not many people do. And in my case, and I always say disclaimer as well, I don't tell people to do what I did. I decided not to take chemo, radiation, or oncology tablets because in my case, the cons were higher than the pros. Because every time I actually went to the radiologist and I asked him, what are the side effects? What are the possibilities of anything happening? And pretty much it was always the bad side outdid the good side. So the good side was a short-term fix, but there's a bad side. And I hear a lot about it. Same with chemotherapy and the oncologist, to the point where we go to it was, when I say the oncologist, they wanted me to do chemo tablets. And these particular chemo tablets, they wanted me to, correct.
Estrogen blockers.
And I said no.
So you're giving up the key hormone that keeps you alive, keeps your heart healthy, and all kinds of things.
Correct. So I asked them, what are my options? And she said, well, you can have a hysterectomy done, but then it's going to cause da 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 da. And I thought, well, you're not giving me much options. Now, in her little chart, she said in 5 years, say, the chances of a secondary or dying of cancer was like 0.5 or whatever it was. But the chances of getting a secondary cancer was 0.8. And I thought, well, I'm going to take my chances on my 0.5. I'm sorry, but I am.
Those statistics are indecipherable.
Correct. But you know what I mean? But for me, it was like, what do you, I don't want to.
It sounds like you had breast cancer in situ. Is that what you had?
What does that actually mean?
That means it's a very early breast cancer. It was established on biopsy.
Correct.
That's right. If it was breast cancer in situ, my personal view is it's a fraudulent diagnosis because, as you've noted, the only thing that makes any difference is how long you live. And the mortality rate for breast cancer in situ is very comparable to an ordinary woman's mortality rate. So that whole thing is a fraud. And I can't believe they do mastectomies and chemo and tamoxifen for that. It's sickening.
Yeah. And I refuse to do none of them. And again, disclaimer, I've done none.
You've got a good BS meter.
Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah. And the thing is, it's quite interesting because the moment I was diagnosed, my doctor was, my surgeon was, we must do an auxiliary clearance of your lymph nodes. We must do this. We must do that. And I was about to sign and my husband said, stop. Let's go home and think about it.
Your husband's got a nose for fraud.
He has.
Good for him. What does he do for a living?
He's actually a life coach.
Good.
And stuff, and he does a lot of work in Peru, with shamanism and medicine work. But, I just thought to myself, and I don't say to people, you must fly to Peru and get healed. I don't say any of that. I just tell people, like you're saying, do your homework. Do your homework before you get anything in your system, anything. And that's what I do. I do use medical doctors because medical doctors are going to give me a blood test. They're going to give me a scan. They're going to let me know what's going on. Beautiful. But when it comes to, right, Grace, you need to do this. It's no such thing in my book, in my vocabulary. I don't need to do anything. Who knows your body better than yourself? So if something doesn't sit right, that's when I ask questions. But a lot of people, what they do, and I don't mean to disrespect, physicians, but a lot of people put their lives in a physician's hand and say, whatever you say, doc, whatever you say. Now, let me ask you the question as a physician, as an MD, did you ever at any time when you were practicing, were you sort of asked to push a particular tablet, a particular medicine? You know what I mean? Like, hey, guess what? This is new on the market. Why don't you push this out to your patients?
Well, I was in cosmetic surgery. We were cash pay. We weren't. We weren't really under the control of anyone. But the Botox people and you can imagine the filler people. They went after us all the time. I think we should talk about the frauds in oncology, which I think is the second most fraudulent medical specialty after psychiatry. And the problem, I know it's a crazy thing to say.
I agree.
And I got to tell, I back it up with hundreds of references in Butchered by Healthcare. Okay. And you can, again, that's $3. So psychiatry, these doctors have a difficult gig, right? They do deal with death and dying to some extent. They have therapies that don't work very well. But they have this incredible conflict of interest in America and probably in Australia, and that is
Mm-hmm.
they get 20% off the top from the medications they deliver. And the drug reps call them
Wow.
up and they say, Doc, you're at 2,700 milligrams this month. You got to get up to 3,000 and we'll give you a bonus. Honest to God, that's the way it works. It's bonus by the freaking milligram. And what's worse is their specialty has about 5 or 6 or 7 diseases that they can treat adequately, but the rest of it it's 2 months improved survival at the most. I mean, it's just crazy. And this is at the expense of things that cost $100,000 a year to start. And some of them are $200,000 or even $500,000 a year if insurance is paying and all that. So the ambition of a lot of these guys, their incomes have escalated with the kickbacks. The ambition of a lot of these guys is to put their patients in a room, with the Barca loungers, a recliner, and they've got 15 of these things, and they're all getting chemo, and the doctor just has to walk around, hold everybody's hand for a moment, and it's just like a money machine. So I mean, it's I would try to do your homework. The other footnote to this is the medical literature has deteriorated to the point where nothing can be trusted at all. And the British Medical Journal is sort of the last man standing in these, the top 5 journals, that include the New England Journal and the Green Journal and these Lancet and all these others. The others are totally bought off. The Lancet published a fraudulent article about hydroxychloroquine last year that was so obviously fabricated that it was outed within a few weeks. The thing got withdrawn, to the credit of Lancet, I guess. I mean, it was withdrawn because of the public outcry.
Mm-hmm.
But the British Medical Journal published a editorial in July 2021 that was entitled "Time to Assume That Health Research is Fraudulent Until Proven Otherwise." Can you imagine? I mean, that's right on the editorial page. And Peter Gercha said earlier, he said, the pervasive scientific misconduct has led to a research literature where one has to dig deeply to find the few gems among all the garbage. So, these people are essentially bought off by the industry, and the industry writes the papers and they sign. I mean, it's freaking sickening. And I'll take it one step further. I'm disgusted by my colleagues. I know we're burning down the respect that people have entrusted us with for hundreds of years. And right now, if anybody with their eyes open should understand that I don't want to say that we don't do miracles. Half of what we do is important, but fully half of medicine in America, which costs twice what it does in Australia and other developed countries per capita. You're aware of this. You've heard this story.
Yes.
We spend 20% of our gross domestic product on healthcare. You guys spend 10. And so it's double per person. And in America, which has worse statistics than Australia or France or any of these other countries, it's like down to number 20 in terms of efficacy of the healthcare system. In America, 50% of what we do is either worthless or harmful. And that includes that COVID vaccine, in my opinion, which we can get into later. But it's a crazy scene.
Well, I just touching on that, like you said, it's because I remember being, I've come to I've been privileged to come to the US a couple of times, come on a holiday, and watching TV, they're talking about this, this tablet that smiling faces. You could do this all day, you could do that all day, and then I mean, I hate to say it, but I would sit there and laugh, because then they're rambling off all the side effects for the next 10 minutes. And I'm like, oh, hang on a minute. And I know it's like by the way, just to let you know, these could cause da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I just thought, oh my God. So I have to say, I am grateful. I am very grateful that in Australia, we have none of that. We have none of that there. When I say we're not pushing it, we're not pushing it on commercials or social media. I mean, depending on your doctor, he could be pushing it in a different way. But I'm so glad that they're not pushing it that way, because I do read a lot. And as we speak, and we're going into the subject after, about the COVID, literally, I just got an email while we're talking saying my delivery is coming. And my delivery is a book called the Plandemic that I just purchased. So, you know, and I'm not sure who the author is, but it's coming. So, but you know what I mean? Because I do my research. Have you got it already?
No,
Well, there you,
that's
you've got another one.
Alex Berenson's book, and it's excellent.
Yeah,
This one is called COVID-19 and the Global Predators. We are the
yeah,
prey. And this
yes.
somehow Peter and Ginger Bregan figured this thing out
Mm-hmm.
early. This one is $3 on Kindle. So
Yeah,
you don't,
there you go.
if you have to read a physical book, it's a big heavy book,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
read the summary at the end after you read the
yeah.
introductions. Yeah.
Well, that's it. But going back to like what we were discussing with all that, you know, the thing is, what I want, you know, again, what we're here to say, like both yourself and myself, we're not saying don't listen to your doctor. We're not saying, you know, just go and do something else. What we're saying is be mindful of the medications that they ask you to take. Again, my mother got secondary cancer with tamoxifen. So this is why the other reason why I was dead set against it. And going back to the big money, I remember walking into the oncologist. I've never been there. When my mother was diagnosed many, many years ago, first time round of cancer, it was a tiny little building in a alleyway. When I went to the oncologist, they call it the Peter MacCallum Hospital. I walked in and I just thought I walked into a 7-star hotel in Dubai, and I thought, this is where the money's going. That
Right.
was my first, you know, image. I was like, wow, this is where the money's going. Now, when I told my oncologist that I refused to take what she's giving to me, her next words were, I don't have time for you. Get out of my office. Honest
Yeah.
to God, that I just looked at her and said, wow, thank you for being honest. Because I thought, you're not here to help me. You're here to keep me in the system. And in 5 years from now, guess what? I'm going to be back in the system with a secondary cancer. And I thought, you're not keeping me in the system. I'm sorry. So this is what I want people to understand. You're saying yourself, you know, people are making profits off this. It's not anymore about humans. It's about who's making the more money. And we always say the pharmaceutical, big pharma, we always say what they do is they keep you there, because if they kill you, they don't make money. If they heal you, they don't make money. So do you agree with that?
Yeah. I don't push my viewpoints about the motives. In other words,
Mm,
the funniest thing about this whole field is I'm ashamed of these doctors that haven't been able to figure out the COVID thing or the vaccine, the quote vaccine. But I don't ascribe negative motives to anybody. We don't
mm,
know what their motives are, and a lot of them are just freaking blue pilled to the max. I mean, they're
mm,
brainwashed, and the whole world has been brainwashed about this COVID thing and how horrible it is, and how
mhm.
the medications don't work, and all this other crap. I mean, it's just unbelievable. The doctors are equally capable of getting brainwashed, and that not everybody has the good BS meter like you and your husband.
But we try. We're not. Look, you know, I mean, if we want to discuss now COVID, we can. Unless you want to discuss
I
something
want to
else first.
bring in the point that there's only 2 countries in the world that
Hmm.
allow DTC ads, those direct to consumer ads, and I believe the other one is New Zealand, and they apparently
Yes.
have some better control over it. But
Yeah.
it's just freaking disgusting. And what they say about those ads is it's not that they're buying the space, because nobody listens to the ads.
Mm,
They're buying the time between the space, the editorial content of the state
right.
stations and the social media and everything else. So they're buying off. And you probably are aware that this quote vaccine is the most profitable medication in history. I mean,
Yes.
Pfizer's just, they've made a lot of money, but they made some mistakes, and I hope we can bring them down, which I can get into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, just touching back on the commercials, like you just said as well. You know, it's quite interesting that they have to put it there to market it. You know what I mean? Because it's like, well, what are you trying to do? But yeah, I just missed my point on that. So if I remember, I'll
They're
come back
trying to
to it.
get the
But
patients to go in the doctor and ask for the medication.
yes, correct,
Yeah.
correct. And the thing is, because, you know, the thing is, you could say to me, oh, Grace, are you feeling, oh, did you eat something? You know, I'm not saying it's mind over matter, but sometimes it is. And I could walk into a physician and I say, oh, I think I ate something that wasn't right. And he says, oh, do you start feeling a little bit nauseous? And I go, actually, I do. Oh, is your stomach hurting now? And I go, well, actually, it is. You know what I mean? And then they go, well, I think it's this. Look, you know, as I said, I work really well with my doctor, and we'll come into the COVID side of that. My doctor is a physician who goes by the books. However, he knows how I am. So he's not going to push me to do things against my will. So, and I like that about my doctor, because he doesn't push it on me. But there are doctors that, no, you must, you must, you must. And that's where people, as I said before, they think, well, you know better than me, doc. What do you say? If I have to hop around on one leg for a year, I'll do it. You get what I'm saying? So they put
trust him.
all of their trust
Yeah.
into him. Exactly. Yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for being on my show today. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing everything you could with us today. And you know, like I will put all the links below and everything for everyone else. So again, thank you. And to all our listeners and viewers, like always, I wish you so much love and light.